So even though the used car didn't cost another dime to make or maintain, the demand will drive that price up as well. These dominoes fall all over the place, and it affects every aspect of the economy. So people are going to start feeling this.
Wow. Welcome to Coach's Corner, where culture, strategy, and real talk collides. I'm Nia McConnell.
And I'm Tamer Mokhtar. We're breaking down the week's biggest plays, connecting the dots, and as always, keeping it real.
No topic is too big, and we're sugarcoating nothing.
Never do, because knowing the game ain't enough. You've got to know how to win it.
Let's get into it.
Let's go.
It's time for Hot Takes, where we say the quiet part out loud. Tam, Blue Origin sent an all-female crew to space. Would you go if Jeff Bezos called you?
My initial instinct is hell no, but at the same time, like, when would you ever get that kind of an opportunity again? I'll let them take about another 2 or 3,000 trips, make sure it's safe before I want to. Look, I'm not going to be that guy in that thing looking for the Titanic that blows up because I wanted to be the
Yeah.
first one out there. I'm all right here. Y'all go ahead and take pictures and send them back.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna be the reporter I'm not going to
Yeah,
space. That's
right.
nuts.
I'm good. I'm good.
I'm
I'll
great.
go to an anti-gravity simulator. How about that?
Hello, and I'm gonna cheer for everybody who went, but I can't do it. Did you see how scared Gayle King looked?
Well, she had some sense. Why wouldn't she look scared?
Yeah, Gayle said, I'm happy I did it, but I don't think she'd go again. Yeah, Gayle was funny.
Right. You may as well ask me if I'm
Somebody's
going to skydive. I'm not doing that either. I'm fine with my feet on the ground.
so you're not jumping out the sky with Will Smith if he said, "Come on, let's go."
You made it sound like Will Smith was a bonus. No, I mean, that's that makes it an even harder no.
Yeah, somebody said they don't even get their DoorDash food as fast as they went up to space and came back. Something ain't right. And I'm like, math is not math. You know what? Who got it wrong? DoorDash or Blue Origin? Tam, they're deporting citizen. The Supreme Court said, hell no. Trump administration needs to bring them back. The man was wrongly deported with no proof. How did we even get here?
And you went from wiping the smile right off my face with that question. So, first of all, the Supreme Court didn't say hell no. The Supreme Court
Mm,
said some wishy-washy bullshit about, you have to facilitate, like they left enough wiggle room in the interpretation where if someone wanted to misbehave, they could. And guess who loves
mhm.
misbehaving, right? So by saying like when you start interpreting the law, and I'm no lawyer,
Yeah.
the how explicit the verbiage is matters. And when you say you must or you shall, like the word shall versus, means something. The word should mean something. The word facilitate, the United States will facilitate or help facilitate, like that makes it unbinding. And believe
Yeah.
me, any crack of light, any crack in that story, they're going to exploit. And that's exactly what they did. So if you want to be a conspiracy theorist about it, you can always say that it was kind of set up for this and they knew this was going to happen and they were always going to be given the just enough leeway to get away with it. And so that's one thing. The other part of it is, I mean, how did we get here? Jesus Christ. Like, again, you know what I said before. If you run into my son in his middle school hallway and ask him what's for lunch, the answer is racism. He knows that the answer
Yeah.
to every question jokingly is racism. How do we get here? We
Raising
can
the
go all the way
kids
back to
right.
that, but look, let's fast forward a few hundred years and let's just talk about how we got here today. Look, I mean, and by the way, it is like so. There's a set of criteria that they're using to classify somebody as a gang member, and it's a point system. And if you accumulate 8 points on their super secret code, which is no longer super secret because it's been leaked, if you get a score of 8 or higher, you are a gang member. Do you know that just having
Mm.
any tattoo of anything that they can claim, like a tattoo, is 4 points?
See,
And
Tam, this
then
is why we needed you to break it down because all of
so
this
and it
is
gets
what's not
worse.
being said. Wow.
And yeah, and it gets worse. And then, if you dress a certain way, it's 4 points. If you live in a house with somebody that might be affiliated, that's 2 points. If you're ever in a picture anywhere in social media with somebody that might be considered in that gang, that's 2 points. One of the people that was deported, his tattoo was literally the autism ribbon with his brother's
Gosh.
name because his brother was autistic.
Wow.
That was
Wow.
literally the tattoo that they cited as being worth 4 points on his gangster score, right? This guy is now in the prison in El Salvador. All
Wow.
right. So, like, how do we get there? Look, any kind of they just look for any excuse to further look, I don't wanna say whitewash because that might be reductive, but anything that they can do that shows, sort of virtue signals around, "Look at how strong and how much we're saving America." By the way, a tattoo and a style of dress, all right, do not equate to due process. At its very worst, at its very best, it's circumstantial evidence at best. Like, it is not proof of anything. But
Wow.
they now are able to do that. And then when the Supreme Court tells them, by the way, you shall facilitate the return of the person that you admitted was mistakenly deported, they just say, sorry, not going to do it. And then they twist the arm, whether roughly or not, of the president of the other country, who then says, I'm not releasing that person. What do you want me to do? Swim back across the country into America? So there are Confederates all across the globe here.
Headlines say one thing, that the Supreme Court ruled against the Trump administration, but if you dig deeper, we're learning way more and just how fucked this situation really is. Wow.
I'll say one other
Please.
thing. There's so many things wrong with that entire scenario and exactly what they're
Mm,
doing that you can get wrapped around the axle for hours on any individual point. And that is kind of the point.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like if you commit so many rules violations, which one do you go after first? And you get caught up
mm.
here. And by the way, the game that always gets played is one of delay and time. And if I get caught up dealing with one of 48 different things that are all layered into one particular insidious act, you'll never get there. You'll never reach the point of justice actually being served and people being made whole, et cetera, et cetera. That's part of the game.
Wow. Tam, are the boycotts working? Walmart, Target, and more, the grassroots boycotts are they really moving the needle or just trending on TikTok?
Well, I mean, it's hard to speak in absolutes on that. It feels good to see certain things. Like if you
Mhm.
decide that by virtue of the fact that a company like Target has turned their back on, advancing or providing opportunities for people of color and minorities to have those same opportunities, and we as a collective decide to boycott and we see that their numbers start to tick downwards, that is inspiring. That is encouraging for the movement, for the moment, for the people that believe a certain thing. That's encouraging. So in that case, you have to say, yes, it's working. Is it ultimately working? We don't know. Time is going to tell that story, as is the case with all of these things. So I mean, it's a case by case. I will say this, like, look at the way certain law firms and like elite level institutions have folded because the current administration has said you have to abolish or dismantle all of your DEI to the tune of $400 million being pulled from the federal funding to Columbia University, which is an Ivy League school, one of the most
Yeah.
selective institutions in the country for their research. Federal funds have been stalled, halted, or removed. And then Columbia went and basically agreed to all of the terms of, dissolving their DEI initiatives. But in the good news, most recently, Harvard refused to comply with those same set of guidelines or specific
I was
guidelines
going there
directed
next,
directly at
Tam.
Harvard
Mhm.
to the tune of $2 billion. And they said, no,
Exactly.
we're going to go ahead and fight this.
Mhm.
So do the boycotts work? Do these things work? It just kind of depends, and that we'll know over the course of time. But it is inspiring to see chinks in the armor.
Definitely. I miss Target. Target was my favorite store. You can ask my kids, but I am holding the line. I'm not going back.
Yep.
And
Yep.
what's the best part for me is seeing, all right, who aligns with my beliefs and who isn't aligned with my beliefs, and I get to show my children that with my dollars. What we're doing is seeing who's on this side and who's on their side, whether we're moving the needle up or not. We're seeing who believes with us and who we need to withhold our dollars from. So
Yeah, this story is
we'll
not
take it.
has not been told yet. It's playing out right now.
Big facts. Let's break down what's really going on out here with this week's biggest headlines decoded. Here's game film. The China US trade war has really escalated. Who really has the cards, Tam? Who has the big joker?
Again, this is another one that's hard. There's no straight answer here. These are two mutually dependent super economies that rely on one another for production and consumerism on both sides. So it's all if you think back to the Cold War and the concept of mutually assured destruction. Right? We're going to keep our nuclear arsenal in Russia just because, and in spite of the fact that you're going to keep your nuclear arsenal in the U.S., neither side wanted to stand down. Neither side wanted to launch because if one launches, the other launches, concept being mutually assured destruction. We're going to keep our armaments pointed at one another in hopes that no one ever pulls the trigger.
Mm,
The same is kind of true with the US and China. This trade war has escalated to such a degree. The US cannot divest from China. Everything from
right.
production to 3 billion humans live there and the
Yeah.
and the consumption that represents, and vice versa to the US. Like the
Yeah.
global economy cannot afford either of these two countries to fully divest from one another. So we'll see. I
So the
mean, it's
big
a
joker is really the economy here, not even China, not even the US.
yeah, it's a stupid game of chicken that's being played right now. It's being
Analogy.
yeah, it's kinda it's a lot of it feels like it's a lot of bluster and emotion that's guiding this as opposed to anything even remotely related.
That's good. If we play in the dozens right now, China winning though. They have a smear campaign right now showing us revealing production companies and manufacturers. It's getting wild out here. Have you seen any of that town?
Now, I haven't seen any of it, but that makes sense. But the issue is gonna be it's like the entire world is viewing the US a certain way,
Hmm.
but the US is becoming more and more isolated and more self sort of absorbed. And from the administration down to those that follow this or support this administration, whichever side you stand on, they are happy within that echo chamber, right? Never mind what the entirety of the rest of the world is thinking.
Tam, did we see this in the cards? Because American history, you just pointed back to the Cold War. American history shows over and over again that we put ourselves such high on a pedestal that we begin to isolate ourselves from other big world powers. Like, could you see this in the cards when this election took place? The results of the election.
You didn't really have to you didn't have to look, you didn't have to be a card reader, you didn't have to have a crystal ball. This is exactly what was promised. And by the way,
Period.
like that is a point of pride for this administration to say, look, we are making good on our promises. So your promises were to isolate the United States from the rest of the world. Your promise was to start a trade war, to voluntarily push this economy onto the brink of recession. Some economists will argue that we're too far gone and it's going to happen. It's inevitable now. And those are all whatever. However, that affects people in the real world, like your sneakers will now go up 20 or 30 bucks, a pop. Your car, the price of buying a new car, even a used car. So the way people need to understand this, and I'm not trying to insult anyone's intelligence, but if the price of steel goes up, or if you stop importing cars from other countries and they reciprocate, and what ends up happening is the cars become more expensive and rarer. So the prices
Hmm.
go up because the demand has remained. People still need a car. When people stop buying the new cars because those prices go up, they start going into the used car market. So now the demand for used cars go up. So even though the used car didn't cost another dime to make or maintain, the demand will drive that price up as well. These dominoes fall all over the place and it affects every aspect of the economy. So people are going to start feeling this. So did I mean, like, you had to believe them when they told you over and over and over again that they were going to do this. There is a reason the global economy exists the way that it does. There is a reason that alliances exist the way that they do. And when you start to think that we can just pull one Jenga block out at a time and the thing will never fall, then you're being naive.
This week's locker room talk hits different. Let's talk about Carmelo Anthony's self defense and who gets the benefit of the doubt in America. Tam, are you up to speed with the Carmelo Anthony case?
You bring me up to speed.
All right, here you go. There was a young man, a high school student at a track meet that allegedly got into an altercation with another young man, and he needed to use self-defense and he stabbed him to death. And so he has been in jail and it's been making big news because the question is, did he commit murder in self-defense or does that excuse only work for people who don't look like us? And it's a huge case in Texas right now.
That's a tough one. I don't know anything about this case in particular. I think what we'll see, never mind the high profile cases, because those are all anomalous, right? When you see one case, you think of Trayvon Martin, you think of Breonna Taylor. These are all individual cases, and there's a ton of justifiable outrage around each of them. They should all be treated the way they are. I think, and I don't know the research off the top of my head, but if you look at the broader sort of statistics around this, that's the way we probably need to judge it. If you're asking the question about black folks more likely to be prosecuted for the exact same action that white people tend to be exonerated over, then I would look at that data and my instinct, my gut would tell me that we can all predict what that data would show. The idea of a stand your ground law does seem to apply to white folks. There have been videos that I've seen posted. Again, these are anecdotes, so it's hard to go on this. But you see a brother walking around with an AR-15 on his back, and he's licensed to carry it, and you will see 6 cop cars gather around and make him drop to the ground, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas, if Billy Bob is doing it, then, hey, Billy, you doing all right today? Okay, have a nice day. Just be careful out there. The treatment is completely different. Again, I don't know the data. I can't speak to it in an educated way. I can tell you what I would presume the data will show, but otherwise, I can't speak to this particular case either. The idea that a kid felt in that kind of danger at a track meet is, frankly, kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is. And I remember being in history class the first time I learned about Emmett Till. And I thought, wow, after all these years, we're still learning about Emmett Till. And then I remember learning about Trayvon Martin, and I'm actually alive and living and breathing. And then Mike Brown, and then I have my own 2 sons now. And it's just like, see how, and then of course, George Floyd, I see how, these cases happen and a man or a boy becomes a headline. And it just feels different when it's our boys and our men versus the opposite side where there's a George Zimmerman or a Cal, whatever the hell his name is. They become heroes and we continue to become villains or just heartbreaking stories that live and vibrate through our communities and our history. So, yeah, man, that's a tough one, Tam. That is a case that's happening in Texas.
Can I add, by the way, the individual cases and the feelings and the impact that that has can never be undermined, right? Just because it's a case of one person doesn't make it any less significant. So that always has to be acknowledged. And you're 100% right. When it comes to Black Boy, when my son was 9 years old, my neighbor called the police on him for riding his bike through the neighborhood. Broad daylight, 20 other kids were riding their bike, and you can guess how many of them were Black, right? And when I went and confronted my neighbor about this, we literally live 4 houses away from them. I said, "You know where I live? Why would you do that?" She literally pulled her car to where he was penned in between the sidewalk, between the curb and her car, so he couldn't move, and told him, "I'm calling the police on you for riding your bike in no different way than any other kid was riding their bike." And when I told them how critical and how crucial and how dangerous that was, and they're putting my son's life at risk because every interaction that a young Black boy or Black man has with a police officer has the potential to go horribly wrong. And she looked at me like I was crazy, and that confrontation ended as it ended. And literally 3 weeks later, George Floyd was murdered for the world on camera for the world to
Mm,
see. So yeah, the one-offs are not. We can't. As I speak more broadly about statistical evidence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we cannot ignore the one-off situations, the emotions, and the ripple effect, the catastrophic effects it has on individuals.
yeah. All right, before we dip, let me plug y'all in so you can be on the lookout because AAV is about to drop VIP tickets to Beyonce, Kendrick, and SZA. Follow at All Americans Vote on IG to enter and catch the winner announcements. And yes, you can check our past giveaways and winners because it's the real deal with real tickets and real winners.
So that's it for this week's Coach's Corner. Appreciate y'all for tapping in.
Keep the conversation going. Drop your hot takes, send it to the group chat, argue in the comments. We see it all. And make sure you follow at All Americans Vote on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
And remember, knowing the game just ain't enough. You got to know how to win it.
We'll see you next week.